My name is Lorraine Novak. I'm the Director of Connect Through Tech programs here at DOROT. I oversee our tech coaching program and University Without Walls, and also our Living Well Digitally series. Joining me today is also Ruthie Gottesman, the program administrator for our tech coaching program, Lily Sokobin, who is our program assistant, and we also have our esteemed panelists today. Mark Phillips is a lifelong technology enthusiast who's made it his career. He's worked for companies such as IBM and Amazon. Some of you may already know Mark as he's a longtime volunteer at DOROT. He's currently volunteering as a technology coach with us. He also serves as a lay member on the technology committee of DOROT's board. So we're very happy to welcome Mark today. We are also very pleased to have Erica Freeman with us. Erica Freeman is also a technology professional. She's a consultant at Deloitte Touche, and her role is to help all of their clients be able to enhance their technology capability. Erica has also spent some time on DOROT's technology committee on our board, and she is pleased to be with us today. Welcome, Erica. Lastly, I know we promoted that Mary O'Shaughnessy, DOROT's IT director, was going to be joining us today. She's very sorry and sends her apologies. She's actually been called to grand jury duty, so she will not be able to join the panel, but our two other experts are going to be able to lead us through these topics quite well. So I'm going to actually turn this over to Ruthie, who's going to get started on our very first topic.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with talking about passwords. And I'm going to put up a poll to begin with to see where you all are with passwords at the moment. So I'm launching the poll. And what you can do is select, oops, that's the wrong poll. There you go. So you can select how you feel about safe password use and management, with the options being not at all confident, somewhat confident, and extremely confident. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to answer. Okay, great. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we have a breakdown of 25% being not at all confident, 65% somewhat confident, and 10% are extremely confident. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Mark Phillips now to talk a little bit more about password use.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm actually calling in from London. I'm here on business, but I'm really excited to still be a part of the DOROT community from across the pond. So we're here to talk about passwords, and that was a really illuminating poll, which to me says that you're a bit more advanced than we thought you might be, which is awesome to hear. But for those people who maybe don't feel as confident or maybe want to learn something new, I thought we would share something. So one thing that I think is important to mention here is that there's a scenario in which, we have a DOROT client, let's say, who began creating different accounts online, each requiring a login and password. So to make it easier to remember, she used her granddaughter's name and birth date, Miriam 624. This might sound familiar to some of you, and used it on all of her accounts. However, she forgot to note this login and password and now just can't get into many, if any, of her accounts. So to talk through this a bit more, we want to think about this in terms of where we have been. For instance, we often turn memorable dates, names, passwords, pet names into passwords. This is left over from the early days of computing when there really weren't many cyber threats online. You maybe didn't bank online. You maybe didn't have a social media page. And there wasn't anything too serious online that you wouldn't want people to not see, perhaps. So now when so many people live their lives online and you are waiting for your next Amazon order, or you're trying to place an order for groceries or something else, a password breach can actually have a big deal of ramifications, especially if you have credit card information or other banking stored online. But fear not, they're actually really great ways to up-level your password game. So some of the cybersecurity professionals that I work with actually recommend setting passwords that are phrases rather than terms. So for instance, instead of Rachel in the scenario using her granddaughter's name and birth date, she could consider a favorite song lyric, a favorite saying, a funny phrase, something that would be hard for a cyber thief to guess. And you might be asking, why phrases? Well, first, it's harder for more of the sophisticated cyber thieves to crack Rachel's password. And you might be wondering why. Well, their technology uses names. Single dictionary words, and number combinations to automatically guess passwords. So for instance, a name and a birth date like Miriam624 would likely be uncovered faster than if it were something a bit more interesting or playful, such as Miriam is my favorite grandchild, do not tell Adam. So it's important to keep these things in mind, but also with less sophisticated cyber thieves, these are people who might actually either know you or perhaps have found you online. They love social media because we put so much of our lives on it. And it doesn't even need to, you might be thinking to yourself, you might have privacy settings already set up, but there are things that can still be seen even regardless of those privacy settings. So for instance, one thing that I've mentioned to some relatives of mine is that if you're using your maiden name on social media, or if you're posting photos that are publicly available, such as an anniversary photo or a vacation photo or a pet photo, people can still see that. And they might be able to use that to guess entry into certain accounts for whatever nefarious reason that they have in mind. And this isn't meant to scare you. This is just meant to be mindful of being comfortable with what you're sharing online, because passwords don't have to be automatically guessed by super sophisticated networks of people. It could just be a random person online who somehow comes across information and tries everything that might work well based on the things that they're able to glean from the photos or things that you're posting online. So, for instance, bringing this back to Rachel in the scenario, she should still feel comfortable posting things online, pictures of her grandchild, whatever, but it doesn't mean that she should be using those actual people, places, things, dates in any of her passwords. So her friends, still probably love to see a good picture of her dog or cute grandchild picture every now and then. So it's really just meant to be more mindful than anything. Moving on to retrieving and resetting passwords. I'm not going to spend too much time here since the vast majority of you seem comfortable with this, but we all forget passwords. It's a fact of life, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Bringing it back to the scenario, Rachel, let's say she forgets a password to log in to her Facebook account or perhaps her Amazon account or something that she uses pretty frequently. The fast and easiest way to reset it is through the website itself and not calling someone. So if you're logging into the account, there will likely be a link or a button that might say forgot password, reset password, that sort of thing. And while each website might have slightly different procedures to reset your password, it's not actually, this is the one case where picking up the phone may not be easier. It's much easier to do it yourself, self-service, as they like to say. And another thing to keep in mind too is that it's worth noting that when you do reset your password, there's likely going to be another way that you need to verify your identity to reset that password. We'll be getting into that later today during this session, but you should have access to your text messages or email account because that's likely where you're going to be able to reset your password. One thing that I do want to spend some time on the next few minutes on, which I think is going to be great for our audience, which is that there are pros and cons to the different ways in which you can store your passwords. You could store them either digitally, online, or physically, which I imagine many people are doing, which means in a notebook, some Post-its that dot the screen of your computer. This probably should sound somewhat familiar. And it really depends on your risk tolerance and also how many people have access to your computer. That's a huge privacy issue. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show a diagram, a chart rather, that shows pros and cons of using either a password manager tool, which is an online tool, or using a physical notebook. So let me pull that up. Okay. There's a bunch of password manager tools online. These are just a few that I'm mentioning here. You may want to jot them down if you want to research them. One which is called 1Password, all one word, or another one called LastPass. These are just a few of them. And there's a few pros and cons to this, so I'll walk you through those. And I'm sure we can make these slides available after the call if you're not able to take a screenshot or if you don't want to write it down all at once. But password managers, a pro here is that these password managers have actually dedicated teams and tools to protect all of their users' passwords. So you can know, rest assured, that it's a lot more secure than perhaps just writing things down and keeping them in a notebook. There's a lot of enterprise level encryption, which ultimately means security around this. Rachel also only needs to set one password to access the tool. The key advantage to a password manager tool is that you only need one password for all of your accounts. And the way that they're able to do that is because they generate really odd, seemingly bizarre alphanumeric passwords for all of your different accounts. You just need to be able to log into the LastPass or the 1Password account in order to gain access to the other accounts. Another thing that's a pro is that Rachel's passwords are available across all of her devices. I'm sure we can all relate to that issue of having some passwords saved on your iPad, some passwords saved on your smartphone and not on others. This is a really integrated way to make sure that you don't have to keep scrambling for something. There are, however, a few cons. Password managers aren't free. They're not prohibitively expensive, but they are not free. They usually can either be paid on a monthly or annual subscription, and whether or not that's in your budget is totally up to you, but they're not what I would consider prohibitively expensive. Another con is that if Rachel forgets that one password, as we like to say, she's up a creek. And it may not be very easy to retrieve all of those passwords. So you might want to really commit this to memory or have a safe place to write down that one password very securely. But it's not great if you have a habit of not remembering certain things. And then finally, another thing is that Rachel might have, if we're thinking about bringing this back to Rachel too, it might be difficult for her to share the login information with a family member who doesn't have access to her devices. So if any of you are sharing your information with a child or a caretaker, it's going to be a bit more difficult to grant them access to those accounts. So now we're going to take a quick look at using a physical notebook, which is what I imagine many people are likely using, and the pros and cons associated with each. So when you're using a physical notebook, what's great is that it doesn't require internet access. It's really just a pen and paper. So if the internet ever goes down or you lose your device, you're still able to have this handy and available. It's also easy for Rachel to share this information with a trusted family member or caretaker. I mentioned that a few moments ago, that if you are working very closely with a care team or family members that need access to your MyChart account or other things that are important for your care, it's a lot easier. Another pro is that it doesn't require learning a new tool. And I know not everyone wants to learn new tools. Again, it really just comes down to willingness to try new things and the security around it. While the pros are really great, the cons are also quite heavy as well too. So if we're thinking about security, physical security, if there's a burglary, if there's someone who comes into the building that you maybe don't trust or don't know, that's what criminals are looking nowadays for physical property robberies. They are going in and they're not just going for cash and jewelry. They're also looking for any sort of identity things that can be used for identity theft, things that could be used for selling on the black market. And if you have everything, including your social security number, in one notebook, that's not great. Another thing is that if the book isn't maintained, it can be difficult to find and use current passwords. I know my parents personally use this, and they have tons of scribbles and crossouts, and it can sometimes be a bit unwieldy. And then finally, I think this one's really important too, which is that if Rachel has limited mobility or memory impairment, getting or keeping track of a notebook might be difficult. I have worked with DOROT clients in the past who unfortunately had memory impairment issues, and completely lost track of this notebook and they were stuck. So when you're using this, when you're storing passwords per se on perhaps the manager tool, like 1Password or LastPass, you can rest assured that's all safe there. It's not reliant on having everything documented in a physical notebook that might be able to get lost or get pinched. But I think that brings us now, I think, to the next part of this, I think, Q&A section. So I can stop sharing my screen and the moderators can take back over.
Sure, thanks. So we got a lot of questions and you did answer a few of them. But one question that came up was in regards to computer generated passwords and the safety around that, and maybe how to remember those as well. Oh, I forgot. I should be asking Erica or Mark if you want to speak on this.
Sure. So computer generated passwords are great. They address a lot of the complexity, uppercase, lowercase, special characters. They could be random letters and characters, or they can also be more memorable random generated passwords. The thing with them is if you're using a tool, it's great to copy and paste into a 1Password or a LastPass. Like Mark was mentioning, it's a little more difficult if you're going to write it down, just because if you get a capital letter or lowercase letter wrong, obviously those are very sensitive when you're using passwords. But yes, computer generated are also very good. Sometimes I think Google offers that to you if you're using Google, but just write it down or copy and paste it into the tool, whatever you're using to keep safe all of your passwords.
Great, thanks. And also we saw some questions about changing passwords and how that can, Mark spoke about how that can be a little confusing if you forget previous passwords. So how frequently should people be changing their passwords for safety?
Sure, I can take that. And it really depends on what the account is. For instance, for banking accounts, for things with really sensitive data, I believe the industry standard is about every 90 days. However, I know that's not realistic. The only reason that I know that is because my own company makes me do that every 90 days. And I'm sure Erica has something similar to at Deloitte and her clients as well. I would say for a non-business user, so an at-home older adult who's using banking or whatever, I would say if it's working, keep it. If you're suspecting a breach, or if someone has the password that you don't want them to have, or you think someone might have seen it, then you should change it. Just another thing that you could do is the next time you're at your bank, if you haven't already, have them set you up with alerts so that if they aren't sure that you're accessing the account, they can send an alert to your phone, either by calling you or text message to let you know that they suspect suspicious activity. A lot of credit cards do this, and I know a lot of smaller regional banks, even not just major banks, are starting to do this as well.
And I think just to add to that, you don't have to have the same exact philosophy for every single one of your passwords. If you shop at Costco and you're like, oh, I'm not concerned about my Costco account as much as I would be concerned about my Citibank account. I would change maybe my Citibank password more often than my Costco one. So you don't have to have that same rules. Maybe you do 90 days for Citi, maybe you do twice a year for Costco. Just consider what is most important to you and you can adjust that way.
Great, I think that's really helpful for me too. It's hard for me to change my password. I get attached to my passwords. And another common question that seems to be coming in is about iPhones, iPads, or your personal device saving your passwords for you and the safety around that, because it's maybe not a password saving location generator, but it's just on your device. And I think people are wondering around the safety of that.
Mark, I would let you use your opinion too, but my gut would be don't save it, only because from a physical security aspect, if someone takes your computer, it's going to auto-populate everything for them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. And one thing that you can do too is that Another thing which might be just another perspective is that you can put a passcode on your devices. And I think that a lot of them are actually requiring that by default now. So if you've been having to enter in a 4-digit or 6-digit code on your iPad, iPhone, tablet, whatever the case may be, that's at least one way to safeguard it. As long as no one knows what that is some protection. But like Erica said, anything that auto-populates, puts the device at risk if it is stolen. That being said, if you are primarily at home and you don't bring it out of the home and you don't have people who you don't trust in your home, you're probably at a lower risk.
Great, I think that's really helpful. Thanks for these questions, everyone. Keep them coming in the chat, and we're going to move on to the next section.
I have one question, please.
I'm sorry, we can't take any more questions, and we're asking if everyone can please put their questions into the chat. There's over 100 people on this call. We won't be able to keep moving along and managing everything if people are using the voice feature to be able to do that. So we're going to move on to the next topic, excuse me, which is two-step authentication. I'm going to launch our next poll for people to be able to ask to tell us a little bit about what they want. I'm still seeing the last polling question and not the new one. Ruthie, are you able to grab the next one?
Excuse me.
I'm asking all people who are not staff or panelists to please keep on mute and allow us to keep moving forward with the program. We know that there are lots of other questions that we cannot answer in the time that we have allotted, and we want to be fair to everyone. So please put them in the chat. Lily is monitoring the chat the entire time. Whichever questions seem to be being asked by the most number of people, we will pose those questions to the panelists. All right, and I see people are answering the two-step authentication question. We have about half the people have answered about whether or not you use two-step authentication. So we'll just let that go for another moment or so. We thank everybody so much for their cooperation. I know it's hard when you have a question you want answered, believe me. All right, we're going to go just another 10 seconds. We're at about 80% on that poll. Okay, so what we are seeing right now is that about 55% of, I'm sorry, about 59%, more than half of the people on this call are saying that two-step authentication is something that they do not use or know about. And so this is a really important element for us to be able to share today. So one of the common situations that happens with this is that people get very diligent about protecting access to their online accounts, all the things that we've just talked about with password managers and putting things in notebooks, using phrases instead of easy to guess things. But is there something else that people can do to protect someone from logging into their account who is not them? So I'm going to turn this over to our next panelist, Erica Freeman, and she's going to talk about two-step authentication, which is the way that you can go about doing this.
Great, thank you, Lorraine. So like Lorraine said, in this scenario, you've done everything that Mark just went through. You have a strong password. You have a password that is a little more complicated. It's not something common, and you are ready for the next step. So while passwords on their own are very important to keep strong, to change when needed, all of the things we just discussed, it's also a really good idea to potentially add multi-factor authentication or two-step authentication. The only difference is one is 2 steps, multi-factor could be 2, 3, 4, etc. steps, depending on how complicated you want to get. But most of the time, what we're going to be talking about here is 2-step. So since it looks like about half of the people know about this and half don't, just as a reminder or to explain to those who don't know, a 2-factor authentication can mean anything. So the first level of authentication is your password. That is your first step. So that is saying, I've created this unique identifier. This is, I know it, and this is what I'm going to provide to you. The second step could be a thumbprint. It could be Face ID. It could be a one-time code. It could be a security, like 4-digit security number or PIN that you know. And it could be any of those things. So while passwords are really good, if for whatever reason it does get stolen or someone is able to use it, it's harder, or it's not as easy as stealing your password as it is to steal your face or your thumbprint, or at least 2 different passwords instead of only stealing one password. So there are 3 methods we'll talk about. One is Face ID, or your thumbprint, which hopefully a lot of people use if you have a smartphone. I hope that if you have the ability to use Face ID, you do that instead of just a 4-digit code. And that way, if someone steals your phone or they steal your computer, if you have a Mac or something that does that, they need your face, they need your thumbprint, they need something else other than your password to be able to get in or access anything. I also know if you have certain apps on your phone, they might also ask for your face or thumbprint in addition to getting into your phone. So all of that is really good. The second step is for individual websites or applications that you can use a text message or email or something to verify yourself. So I'll actually demonstrate this. I'm going to share my screen. And for example, we're just going to go to PayPal. If you don't use PayPal, it's just similar to a Citibank. It's another method of paying for items. Log in. And you see here, it already knows me because I've used this before, but it's asking me to enter my password. That is my first step. That is my first method of authentication. In this case, I do use 1Password, so I have it saved here. It logged me off, so I will log back in. And I typed it wrong. So that was me using the master password. And I already had come to PayPal, but it stored my username, which was my phone number, and my password. We're just going to copy it. You all seem trustworthy, but I'm not going to share with you my password. And if you do any kind of tech coaching, please do not share your password, even if you trust that tech coach, even if they're from DOROT, you should not be sharing your password in those kind of scenarios. We'll log in. And then it's going to say, get your one-time code, which it'll say in a second. And it's going to, this is how I've set it up, and I'll show you where you can set up the method you're using. But I've set it up to send me a text message. So I'm going to click continue. And it said, we sent a 6-digit code to the phone number. So I'm on my Mac so that you can all see this. And I'll get my text messages on my computer. So in this case, you'll see that this is my security code. This is from today. I've done this a few times. Obviously, you could see that every single time I log in, it's going to give me a code. It's not a big deal that you all are seeing all of these codes. As they say, they expire in 10 minutes. So if you know a code from, July, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's not existing anymore. And even this code I just did, if we waited 10 minutes, I would no longer be able to use it. It's going to expire. So this is that second step. It has texted me a code, and this is a very unique code, not only for me, but for this moment in time, this specific moment in time. So we're going to copy it over. And that is two-step authentication. The way you would set this up, and most places have this, is you go into settings of whatever application we're looking at. So in this case, we're in PayPal, but almost every website, every app, your phone in general, everything should have a security selection under settings. And this is going to be where you change your password, you do security questions. We won't click on those, but you have all of your security set up. And if you want, it might say two-step, it might say multi-factor, whatever it says, this is how you're going to set it up. And if I went to go into here, you can see that it says it's on, so we can turn it off. If you don't have this on, it would say it's off and you can turn it on. My primary device is my phone number, and it's going to send me a text message. If I wanted something else, PayPal gives me the ability to use an authenticator app. And that brings us into tokens. It's a little more complicated, but you can have another application on your phone that generates a unique code every 30 seconds or every 60 seconds instead of just when you ask for it. So right now I say, text it to me when I need it. If I wanted to use an authenticator app, I would go find an application from the App Store. I would download it and I would set it up. So that way it gives you options. So that way, when I go to log in, it's my unique 6 or 8 digit code in that minute. So that's how this is a little bit different. And these should be available on almost any source, any application, any website. There are certain websites, like we said, it depends on the risk, where they might not have that kind of option. And then in that case, if you really need it, you can always set up two-step authentication another way if you feel like it's really important. It could be, like I said, text message, token, app, email, phone call, whatever makes most sense to you and whatever's easiest for you, and also whatever that application has available. So like I said, it's really good to do that. And it's really important to do that if it's available, because that way you have a less chance of being hacked, because they either have to do 2 steps or they have to get your thumbprint or face somehow in order to log in.
Erica, we're going to allow one. Do you need another minute to finish up, or should Lily proceed to questions?
I think we're good.
All right, terrific. Lily, take us away.
Great, thanks. So a few questions about Face ID and thumbprints. And if you could just maybe explain, if you have some knowledge on how that works, how does a Face ID or a thumbprint work in protecting your password, and how is it a form of 2-step authentication?
Sure, I can take that away, and then Erica can add something if she'd like. So first and foremost, it depends on what you have. If you have a smartphone that was created or you bought within the last 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, you probably have this feature already. What it does is it uses the front-facing camera on your phone. So when you're looking at the screen, there's likely a camera right above the screen, and that uses it as a way to verify it's your identity to unlock or use certain features on your phone. On Apple devices, like an iPad or an iPhone, it's called Face ID. If you have an Android device, I imagine it's called something else. I don't know what that exact name is. I don't have an Android. That being said, what I like about that feature is that it's a lot easier for me to get into my phone. So if my hands are full, if I'm on the subway or whatever, all I have to do is just hold the phone up to my face and it unlocks my device. It says, okay, this is the face of Mark Phillips. He looks like a trustworthy, nice Jewish boy. Let's let him into the phone. So that's sort of what the situation is. As far as how does it work, I don't know the nitty gritty on how it works exactly. It uses biometric technology, which is not something that I quite fully grasp, but it is something that is securely stored and used by the device manufacturer, such as Apple or Android.
Mark, can you just clarify for our audience if Face ID and thumbprint ID is a valid way of getting into accounts and other things, or is it really just for unlocking devices and maybe
could be
using a
u-
few of the features on your device?
Yes, you can. That's a good point, Lorraine. Yes, I'll expand upon what I said and include it to gain access to certain accounts. So it's not just unlocking your phone. I, for instance, use Face ID and text messages to get into my banking app on my phone. I also use it for my actual my work phone. Amazon requires a few different factors to make sure I am who I am to get into their network on my phone. So you can use that to set it up for primarily anything. As Erica mentioned, more and more apps are requiring people to use it because it's more of a safety thing. If you don't want to use two-factor authentication for something that doesn't have what you deem to be critical information, you don't have to do it. You can likely go into the settings for that specific app or website to remove it. But I think as a best practice for banks, for anything that has things related to your identity, anything that has stuff on there that you don't want potentially, leaked out to the public, you should be using two-factor authentication and using either thumbprints or your faces to do so.
And just to add to that, Mark, I think the one thing where I was taking everyone through on the demonstration, it was very clear the 2 steps. If you're on an app on your phone, sometimes it looks like they're just taking your face and you don't have to enter your password. I think one point is your face is more secure than a password. It's very unique, unless you have an identical twin. Your face is going to be more unique than a password, but also you do have to use your authentication at least once to even unlock the phone. So by unlocking the phone, that's almost your first step. And then to unlock the app, that's your second step in, the greater scheme.
Great, thank you. And just a really quick question about token apps. Do you recommend using a token app? Can you use a token app for one app for all of your accounts? That was a question that came up.
Depends. I know that's not the answer everyone wants, but it depends. I know Microsoft has one, Google has one. There are very popular ones. Not all of them will sync to it because at some level your app needs to be able to talk to the source of what's getting the token. So that's why we're saying that one's a little more complicated. If you do want to set up a token and you want to do it with a bunch of different apps, I would say let's do that during a Connect Through Tech session where we can help you a little bit more specifically on that. But yes, but not all, hopefully.
Okay. That works. And I like that you recommend asking on a personal basis. Great idea. Okay, and that's all the time we have for these questions, but you can keep sending them in the chat and we're going to move on to the final topic.
All right, so now we're going to be talking about finally phishing and vishing, which are scams conducted either online or over the phone. So I'm going to put up another poll. So you can go ahead and answer. The question is, do you know how to determine how to respond to a request for information? So I'll give everyone a moment to respond. So it seems like a majority of people have responded. So I'm going to share the results. So 55% of the people have answered yes, where 45% have answered no. So I'm going to go ahead and share our scenario. So here's a phishing and vishing situation. Hilda got an email from her son. It said he was traveling for business and has lost his wallet. He asks her to send him money so he didn't miss his flight home. It seems strange that he would not have asked his wife or that he had not mentioned to her that he was traveling. She didn't want him to miss the plane though, so she followed the instructions for getting the money to him. I'm now going to turn this over to our panelist team, who's going to answer this, lead this section together, Erica and Mark.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Ruthie. So
Sure.
I'll kick it off. So first step is when Hilda got that email, how would she even know that that comes from her son or grandson? I forget who it was, but how would she know who it comes from? Because if it says, Hilda's grandson as the name, she might just say, oh, that's my grandson, and reply and do all the steps that we said she did in the scenario. But we'll show you how to do that. I'm going to share my screen. And don't worry, we're in my spam folder, but as you can see, I even get a lot of phishing emails. And we will go into them, but don't worry, I don't plan on clicking anything. This one that I will click on, and let me, Ruthie or Lauren, let me know if I need to zoom in, if it's a little too small for anybody. This one says eFreeman28. That's actually my email. So if this were my mom or my grandma that's opening up their email and they say it says eFreeman28, and it says, hey, I lost my wallet, can you send me money? It would actually make sense that they would be like, oh, that's Erica's email. I would know to go into that. The first thing you want to do is actually look at the email. So if my email is eFreeman28, you would expect eFreeman28 to be right here. And that's not what this is. This is some
Erica?
random string. Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a brief second. We're getting a couple of things in the chat saying it's too small. Would you be able to zoom in, please?
No
Thank
worries.
you so much.
Is this good? Okay. So here it says, this is what the name was, eFreeman28. And again, if my mom or my grandma saw this, they would be like, oh, that's my daughter or my granddaughter. But when you actually look at the email that's behind the name, it's not my email. This is .club, it's not .com, it's not Yahoo, it's not Gmail. It doesn't even make sense. That's your first warning sign. And you know what, delete it. If it's not anything that makes sense, if it looks weird, if you already had some red flags that your daughter or granddaughter or grandson weren't going on the trip, delete it. If it's important, they will call you, they will talk to you. They will find a way to get in touch. If it looks like this, get rid of it. It doesn't make sense, it's weird, it's spam. That's the easiest way to say it. I have plenty of other examples in here. Some good ones actually. And don't be fooled. And Mark, you can let me know too. I've been surprised at how good some of these phishing emails can get. I've actually had to really look at some, not all of them, some of them are silly. But there's been like one or two where I thought like my Apple account was an issue, or I thought I owed money to Apple for some reason. And I've actually called them on the phone and said, hey, this looked weird. Can you help me? Can you let me know if my account's okay? This one says eFreeman order confirmation, like I bought something. When I first saw this was actually this morning, I said, oh, I didn't buy anything from Walmart. First red flag is Walmart is spelled wrong. But if you click into it, it actually has their, we'll show images. I have to zoom out just a little bit so you can all see this. It does actually have pretty good branding that you would see this and you would be like, oh, this looks like the Walmart logo. This kind of looks like their color scheme. This looks like, oh, a survey. I might have been there recently, and here it's spelled correctly. Again, if you haven't bought anything, get rid of it. But if you go back to that email, it's at Evan's post at XYZ. If you were getting an email from Walmart or Apple or anything, it would be at apple.com. It would be at walmart.com. It would be something very, very obvious. So if it looks funky, just delete it. And then we have another example. You have an unclaimed balance. Again, some of these are just, if you're not sure, go back to the email. We have one, because we were talking about Costco before, careerslocator.com. If it was from Costco, if Costco wanted my feedback, even if they're not asking for money, if they just want your feedback, if it's not Costco.com or something.org or something.net, delete it. So when you see these, I think the biggest thing is what should you do? So with Hilda, she unfortunately did go and pay through in that scenario. But if it looks weird, delete it. If your grandson or your son or someone was trying to reach out to you, they'd find another way. If it was urgent, they'd reach out. The other thing, if you're not sure, you can say, hey, you can text them or call them and say, hey, I got an email from you. Can you confirm? Or if it was your grandson and they have a wife or they have a husband, you can call them and say, hey, I just got this email, or I just got this text, because there's phishing through text now. Is this right? Does this look right? Should I do it? If you don't know, just ask. And same with credit card companies, same with Apple. In the scenario where I got a really good email from Apple that did end up being phishing, I called Apple. I said, hey, it looks like they're asking me for something. Is this real? And they told me no. And we went through my account and they were correct. If you get a call, if you get a text, if you get an email and you're not sure, say, you know what? I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call you back. Don't ask them for their number. If it sounds like phishing, just go through the customer service line. That's the best way to be sure that you are talking to the correct person and getting the correct information. And when in doubt, just go back to that. Just go back to the source. And Mark, I'll let you talk through the next point.
Great, thank you, Erica. So there are a few things that you should be never sharing online. And while some of these might seem obvious, I think sometimes we do fall victim, or we almost fall victims to certain things. And there's things to keep in mind. So for instance, few people will ever ask Hilda for her banking information online. No one will ever email you about your banking information other than, say, a statement, if you get your statements delivered online. They will never say, we need you to remit money over it. They will never ask you to change your password through an actual email. It'll be a password reset link. It wouldn't be, give me your password. Those are the things that you never share online. And that's, the best thing that I would say is that I think we've all had those calls where someone pretends to be Microsoft, someone pretends to be Apple, and they try to pressure you into something. Even if you're not super tech savvy, you should never feel like you're under duress or being forced or pressured to do something. If they get angry at you, that's not, you know immediately that it's a scam, because there are so many places now where customer service people are being graded and scored and having their phone calls listened to. So they're not going to put their employment at risk to yell at you and ask you for your password, or to make time-based threats like deleting your account in 5 minutes, or giving you a certain amount of unreasonable things to do within a certain time frame. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you are on social media, you shouldn't be using it to communicate sensitive information. For instance, you certainly wouldn't share your social security number anywhere. So you should also be mindful about things that you might not want out there that maybe aren't exactly related to your identity. So for instance, if you are away for the weekend and you're posting photos from a really nice vacation, you might want to wait until you're back, especially if you live in a building that perhaps doesn't have security or door people. You might want to be mindful of that. Another thing to keep in mind as well is that, on social media as well, be mindful of what names you're putting out there. Do you want to put your maiden name on there? Do you want to put your anniversary date on there? Do you want to put your birthday on there? Those are the types of things that I mentioned earlier in my part of the discussion that I think are relevant here too. These are great, what thieves call honeypots, where they can find great information about people to use that for identity theft or to try and get into accounts. So Ruthie, I'd love to turn it back over to you for any questions or things.
Sure. Lily, do you want to take 2 questions from the chat?
Yes, sorry. Hi, everyone. So some of the questions that came up, one that I found would be helpful for the group, I think, is if a phishing email comes up and maybe you have some issue with it, and then you maybe click on it and then you start getting lots and lots more emails or phishing types of emails, requests, texts. What can you do about preventing that from happening, from getting more and more? Some people, start getting contacted a lot more after just one.
I think the first thing is make sure you know what you did. If you just opened the email like I was demonstrating, nothing's going to happen. It's if you click a link, it's if you go somewhere else outside of your inbox. Unfortunately, the answer to this is phishing is going to happen. That's why we have spam folders. My spam folder is huge. You're going to get calls. I think there used to be the do not call list, and I know I've put myself on it many times, and I still get something about car insurance, and I live in New York City and I don't even have a car. So unfortunately, the answer is it's going to happen. And even if you got ahead of it, every single day, hackers are getting smarter and smarter or learning a new technique. So the best thing that you can do is just be secure and be safe. And if you need to be extra diligent on your end, do that. If you need help, reach out. I know that's not the best answer. I don't know, Mark, if you want to say something else, but it's just to be aware of everything when you're, using technology.
I think you covered what I was going to say. I know we're running short on time, so we probably want to get to other questions too.
Sure. Yeah. So similarly, off of that question, if you accidentally open a link, for example, and you leave your email inbox, what can you do after the fact? If it maybe plants something in your computer, what is the next step to do once you've done that?
So there's a few things to keep in mind. There's an entire industry related to called tech remediation, where if you've clicked on something that started to install malware, your computer's running really slow, that requires a skilled technician to fix. That is beyond what DOROT DOROT's technology committee can do to help you connect through tech program. There's a number of different people online. If anyone's on the Nextdoor app, or if anyone is familiar with, how to use Google, you can search for these types of companies. I believe there's one called Tech Armor on the Upper East Side, and there's a few others that are devoted to helping people remediate their computers. I don't feel comfortable giving advice on this. I'm not a cybersecurity professional. I do work for a tech company, but cybersecurity is its own field. And I would say leave it to the professionals, especially if it's related to impacting the performance of your device.
Thanks. Yeah.
Mark or
Um,
Erica? I'm sorry, Lily. I just want to clarify one point. What about moving those things into the spam folder? I know Erica mentioned, having this whole spam folder. Is that something that we can quickly demonstrate to people how to, if they get an email that's sort of one of these phishing things, that it can be sent into a different kind of inbox so they don't have to necessarily see them over and over again?
Yes and no, we can demonstrate it. Is it going to work 100% of the time? Probably not. But we can demonstrate it. I think the other thing, to Mark's point, is if you don't know who to go to and you're not comfortable Googling, I'm sure if any of you have grandchildren or something, that they can help Google or find resources, because like Mark said, it does need a skilled person. But let's say, I'll pick something random. I got an email from Petco about my dog's food. This is not spam, but I'll fix it later. So this is my Yahoo email. If you have Gmail, if you have something else, it should be on the top somewhere. Even if I didn't click into the email, if I just clicked the check mark, it should also have another option up here. If you don't want to go into the email, you should be able to mark it as spam. And then same, if I mark this as spam now, Yahoo does give me the option. I can just unsubscribe, even if it's not spam, or I can report a spam. I'm not going to do that because I need my Petco emails. But if you do it by accident, you can go into your spam folder. all of this is genuinely spam, except Petco actually. And we could say restore to inbox. So if you do something by accident, you can move it. I actually have a lot of spam in this Yahoo inbox because I do have too many emails. I have one that I give out to friends and family and that I use for professional purposes or personal purposes. My Yahoo email is what I use for stores and for random stuff or for just like your, oh, I need to fill this out, I'm going to put in a random email. That's how it helps me because I don't check this one as much. And it's I think this whole thing is pretty much my junk email other than certain sites. So that's also an option too, if you wanted to set up another email account for giving to stores, for filling out forms, for shopping, for things that are more likely to get picked up versus I have my email for like my friends and family and, you know, actual stuff.
Do that too. So thank you to our two panelists. I know that we had a lot of questions in the chat that were not answered today. Ruthie and Lily and I will be working on how we might be able to get some of those answers to people. Potentially, maybe we can put together a handout that just has all the questions that were asked today with all the answers, and we'll just send it to everybody. It's not possible for us to individually get back to each person. As Ruthie said earlier today, you could also feel free to reach out to our tech coaching team, and we would be able to put you in touch with one of our trained volunteers to help. Please note that we are running a second session of this event that will cover other topics. It will be taking place on Wednesday, March 30th at 1 o'clock. If you've already registered, don't be concerned. We'll send you a reminder email. If you haven't already registered, please do. We'll be sending you an email for that. And please be on the lookout tomorrow. You will be getting a feedback email from us. This is our first event in this series, and we are very eager for your thoughts about what worked and what didn't. So this is a great way for you to be able to communicate that to us. And it is now 2 minutes after 2, so we're going to be respectful of everyone's time and wish you all a great afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today.